On Tuesday night, my son sent me a bill for $190,000 for a wedding I was banned from attending. I put the paper down, listened to the clock ticking like a countdown to an explosion, and opened my laptop. If they want to buy respect with my money, they're about to learn how it flows where I tell it to. I'm James Washington, 74, a retired electrical engineer, a man who's spent his life taking apart systems and knows what happens when the right components are pulled. They call it the big day. I call it a test of love, leverage, and who's really paying the price. You want to see which wire I hit first? I am Jim Washington, 74 years old, and I'm still reeling from a betrayal delivered by my own son. After 4 decades tightening bolts, tracing voltages, and debugging control panels, I built a modest life in Charlotte, a 3-bedroom brick house, whose wiring I redid back in 1992, a small front lawn I mowed last weekend, and an old blue pickup that sleeps under the carport. Mornings on Beatty's Ford Road are so quiet I can hear the school bus hiss to a stop at the corner and the wind chime. Grace hung on our porch back when she was alive, ticking softly in the breeze. At my age, I understand resistance and feedback loops better than I understand the human heart. Still, the hardest jolt I've ever taken came from the one person I expected to respect me. Last Tuesday, Mark sent me an invoice $190,000 to fund his wedding while banning me from attending. The envelope, thick and white, arrived by courier and sat skewed on the doormat, damp with dawn. I split the glue strip. The smell of fresh paper and ink lifted like a lab solvent. The first page read like a schematic under overload. Harbor View Estate Deposit, Premier Catering Platinum Package, Luxury Honeymoon Overwater Suite. At the bottom, in small, colder type, a note, Guest Status, Father of the Groom not applicable. The words hit like a surge. I nudged up my brown-rimmed glasses. As the second hand of the mantel pocket watch ticked dry and hard, something equally dry and hard rose in my throat. Mark even had the nerve to add a line, "Be grateful I'm letting you help at the bottom." The sentence, slanted in a showy font, winked like cheap chrome. Once, my boy wrote hand letters to his mother. Now he was mailing me a bill for filial piety. I set the paper on the walnut table, and the rasp of the sheet sounded like a door slamming between father and son. The characters gleamed black as solder on a board, only this joint fused one thing perfectly: arrogance to his face. I stared at that invoice and smiled cold and thin the way a man smiles who has watched too many breakers trip from phantom loads. That smile wasn't for Mark. It was for the humming fantasy he and Madison Richardson had wired together. I slid Grace's photo album aside, her holding newborn Mark, and, for a beat, the invoice lay atop it like a second mourning cloth. Then I pulled out a chair, rubbed my thumb along the table's edge until the tremor left my hand, and reached for the old address book. That evening I didn't pound the table. I opened a file. First call, David Chen, my financial advisor of 15 years. "David, I need a restricted escrow," I said on speaker while I poured black coffee. "Nothing moves unless I approve in writing, no guarantees, no verbal authorizations." I wrote 3 lines on a yellow legal pad: no guarantees, no advances. Written approval only. Second call, Thomas Harrison, folks still call him Tommy, my lawyer. "Tommy, audit every clause that could let someone sign on my behalf," I told him. "I want to know where the gaps are before someone slides through." When I hung up, the wall clock struck 8. A long night had just begun, but at least I'd flipped the right switch. If they wanted to purchase respect with my money, they were about to learn something I've known my whole life. Money, like current, flows exactly where you route it. I grew up in North Carolina when the paint on the whites-only signs was still fresh enough to sting your eyes. I learned to duck my head under thresholds without ever bowing my spine. You can bend a back when you're hauling cable, but you don't loosen the bolt that holds your dignity. On blackout nights in our side of town, my father and I fixed blown fuses by lamplight. He'd say, "Current shines from copper, a man shines from self-respect." Folks could take my seat, but they couldn't unscrew the fastener of pride anchored in my chest. Grace and I built our life with calluses and quiet choices. The 3-bedroom brick house, wired by my own hands back in 1992, wasn't a prize so much as a promise kept. Every autumn, Grace planted a ribbon of yellow mums along the fence. I pulled new runs to the garage and labeled the panel with neat pencil marks. The mortgage bill lived in a red metal clip on the fridge, and in the upper right corner she'd pencil paid with a small, triumphant curl. Sundays smelled like peach cobbler. The good dishes came down only on Thanksgiving, wrapped in old newsprint she saved by date, like time itself was something to fold and put away. Grace has been gone 5 years now, cancer, and this house has been louder with ticking and emptier with silence ever since. Her knit cardigan still carried lavender the week she passed. After that, supper for 3 became a place set for 2, then a chair that stayed pushed in. Through high school and college, Mark was any father's pride, the kind of boy who said, "Dad, it's me," every Sunday before asking if I'd wound the mantel watch his granddad left me. His Duke acceptance letter sits framed in cheap flea market wood because Grace said what matters deserves a frame, not a price tag. On graduation day he hugged me hard while Grace cried her mascara into a soft gray fan. Those pictures still greet you in the entryway. Then came promotions and Madison Richardson, and the grain of his priorities began to shift, a millimeter at a time until the landscape was new. After his first bump at work, Mark started using words like positioning, personal brand, strategic relationships. The Sunday dinners thinned, the cocktail hours multiplied. The name on his badge began to weigh more than the one in his Bible. The signal from my boy started picking up static. Madison was old Charlotte money done in a whisper, pearls at the throat, a perfume you noticed only when she'd left the room, and a way of lowering her voice as if every sentence were for members only. She measured value in zip codes and spoke of my family's standards the way auditors speak of regulations: immovable, invisible, and always in effect. At my table she'd set her fork down just so and call the house cozy in a tone that filed cozy right next to small. She suggested velvet chairs might elevate the space, like a room in a life were a lobby you refreshed. Every spring, I watched Mark absorb her language. We replaced I whenever plans were hers. Dad shrank into a footnote. In our old kitchen, sincerity got edited to optimization. Enough to live got recast as time to level up. The first crack traveled straight through Grace's funeral. Our small church had the choir warming her favorite hymn, the organ breathing steady. Madison leaned to Mark's ear and murmured about keeping it elegant and brief so guests don't tire. Guests, as if a farewell could run long the way a program overruns its time slot. When I said Grace would want the choir to sing the whole hymn, Madison checked the thin watch on her wrist. Mark touched her arm and told me, gentle as a note in the margins, "Maybe next time, Dad." But with the dead there is no next time. Between the organ pipes I heard something else, the quiet click of a slate turning from grief to optics. 6 months before the invoice, Mark placed a ring box on the kitchen table. The bulb above threw a quick blade of light across its lid. There was no Grace to gasp and clap, only me pouring more tea and asking softly, "Son, are you sure you'll still be yourself wearing that ring?" Madison lifted her glass and spoke more about a vision for our future than about family. I swallowed the word congratulations with a hunch I couldn't shake. This wedding wouldn't be built of vows so much as a campaign brief. And the boy who used to call every Sunday was learning a new grammar, one where love came edited for length, and reverence for the past was a note marked omit for pacing. Instead of joy, Madison Richardson launched straight into a wedding plan that read like a corporate merger. She spread a spreadsheet across the screen: objectives, KPIs, timelines, brand guidelines for the photos, even a dress code mapped to hex colors. A 20-slide deck followed. Vision, mission, values, vendor tiers labeled strategic partners, a media calendar, and a short list of lifestyle outlets to court. It wasn't an invitation. It was due diligence with a press kit. When I asked about the guest list, she breezed, "We're curating an intimate experience," a phrase that, in her mouth, sounded like a velvet rope. Intimate meant fewer than 60 attendees, priority to faces that fit the aesthetic. I mentioned Aunt Clara from Durham. Madison typed a neat note, not aligned with aesthetic. Consider RSVP, no. In their house, intimate was a fine-tooth comb that caught every relative who wouldn't flatter an Instagram feed. Last month, the final insult arrived by courier. Heavy stock, a gold-embossed seal, a whisper of perfume. The seating chart gave prime tables to a yoga instructor and Madison's personal shopper. The groom's family column was an empty cell waiting for a miracle. A sticky note along the edge read, "Please confirm financial contribution by Friday," as if a bill had been stapled to a blessing. My name had vanished like a deliberate typo. The occupations of strangers were bolded like shareholder titles. I called Mark to ask what we were doing. He stumbled through capacity limits and complex dynamics until Madison took the phone. "Jim," she said in the tone adults reserve for explaining stoplights to children, "this day needs to reflect the future, not linger in the past. You understand, don't you?" She didn't ask to learn, she asked to close. In the background, I heard clinking glassware and low rooftop jazz, the soundtrack of arrangements made over other people's money. I did understand. I remembered a freshman year night when Mark called to ask how to sweat a clean solder. Now he was welding his life to a club that never grants permanent membership. The future they kept praising was a revolving door you get in only by leaving your roots on the mat. My son was trading a spine for a laminate card, and the bylaws of that club read, "No warranty on the soul." They made one critical miscalculation. They confused subsidy with sovereignty, budget with guarantor. They thought cropping me from the frame would cut me from the power source. The invoice spread on my kitchen table told the rest of the story. Harbor View Estate, non-refundable half-due, premier catering platinum package, luxury honeymoon overwater villa, photography, VIP social bundle with day of influencer management. Down in the footer, a service charge that might as well have read gratitude expected. It looked less like a celebration than a bill of materials for a machine of illusion gears greased by someone else's wallet. What they didn't know is that this retired electrical engineer has spent 40 years learning which systems overload and which single component, if turned, forces a redesign. Not every hot circuit needs more power. Most need less consumption. Pull the right fuse, and the board stops pretending. Respect and money flow in the same direction. Where respect runs backward, I reverse the current. I reached for the yellow legal pad and drew 2 arrows. Respect up, funds down. The pen stopped at one word, escrow. Then I opened the laptop and flipped the only switch that mattered: no disbursements without my written approval. If they meant to buy acceptance with my dollars, they were about to learn what happens when you open a circuit and the lights go honest. That night I opened my laptop and started digging. First stop, Harbor View Estate. The homepage auto-played a sunlit drone pass over marble columns and a fountain, piano swelling like a hand at my wallet. Buried in a vendor subpage, the real music played in 6-point type. Non-refundable deposit, 50%. Substitutions prohibited without written approval. Those are switches a man like me can flip. Next, Premier Catering. Their gallery looked torn from glossy spreads, ice sculptures, waiters with posture like metronomes, canapes named like PR theses. I scrolled past the foam and flowers to the line that mattered. Private events, wire transfer 72 hours prior, no exceptions. For corporate clients they offered net 30, but for private parties the clock ran hot. I underlined it on my yellow pad. 72 hours equals leverage window. Then I pulled up the platinum tier photography outfit. Their Instagram was a strip of beautiful people framed by golden hours, every frame calibrated for maximum social impact. What stopped me wasn't the lenses, it was the deliverables. Exclusive social content, pre-written captions, coordinated publication with lifestyle bloggers, a Content Day add-on with staged influencer drop-bys. This wasn't photography, it was a brand foundry. The wedding was a broadcast schedule, reels, lookbooks, a press kit, everything but an honest memory. I leaned back and watched the pieces lock together. Mark and Madison weren't planning a wedding. They were producing a show with blocking, cues, and a hand-picked audience graded for favorability. and somehow I was expected to bankroll the performance while being barred from the theater. My phone chimed. A text from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Washington, this is John from Premier Catering. We're finalizing details for the Washington-Richardson event and need to confirm your payment timeline as you're listed as primary contact. Please call at your convenience." Primary contact. I stared until the words burned onto my retinas. Mark hadn't just sent me an invoice. He'd chained my name to the financial keel so vendors would come knocking when the tide ran low. I dialed. John answered on the second ring with the practiced cheer of a man who handles other people's celebrations for a living. "Mr. Washington, thanks for calling back. We're thrilled about the Washington-Richardson event, just need to lock payment milestones." "John," I said, keeping my voice level, "let me clarify something. I have not approved a single charge. If you need authorization, you'll need it in writing from me." Silence. A careful throat clear. "I apologize. I was under the impression the planner said you were handling the account." The planner guessed wrong. Do not accept any verbal commitments on my behalf. Nothing moves without my signed email. Otherwise, nothing happens. He asked me to confirm by email. A minute later, my inbox pinged. Acknowledged. No verbal authorizations. I filed it under escrow divided by proof. When I hung up, the room had gone blue with screen light. For the first time in months, I felt something I could measure control. Too long I'd watched Mark drift out on a current I couldn't reverse. Turns out money is a language everyone understands, even sons. I wrote on the pad, "Money equals signal. Wrong signal cut power." I opened a new tab and searched for someone I hadn't called in years. Darren Turner. He'd been Mark's best friend in high school, the kind of kid who ate at our table more nights than his own. Where Mark went corporate, Darren built Turner Photography, a modest, honest business shooting real families at human prices. His website was simple: a couple on a porch under a patched tin roof, a newborn scrunching against a tired mom, no filters needed. Truth, not staging. I found his number and called before doubt could catch up. Turner Photography. "Darren, it's Jim Washington." A beat, then warmth for real. "Mr. Washington, I was just thinking about you last week. How are you?" "Better this minute. I need a favor. It's about Mark," I figured. His tone shifted, a friend choosing a side. "He rang me months back about the wedding." I quoted my rate. He laughed and said they were going with someone aligned with the vision. Never heard again. The casual cruelty of that cut landed where it should. Darren had been a second son. Mark had dismissed him for not being expensive enough. "I need eyes and ears," I said. "This wedding has turned into something Grace would have hated. Help me understand what I'm actually being billed for." A long silence. When Darren spoke again, it was with the dry clarity of a man who knows the industry's backstage. "Mr. Washington, this isn't a wedding. It's a debut. Madison has been telling people it's their introduction to Charlotte society. The platinum photo package costs more than most folks' cars. The vendor list is top shelf, the kind that lands on magazine pages. The whole thing is designed to announce that Mark and Madison have arrived." "Arrived where?" I asked. "Somewhere they've decided you don't belong." The words hung in the air like smoke, no heat, but the smell lingers. I closed my eyes and saw Grace's face the day Mark graduated. Duke, pride, hope, the certainty we'd raised a good man who'd choose well. "Darren, can you pull vendor schedules, payment timelines, anything that gives me leverage?" "I can do better. I know people. Let me make calls." When we hung up, I walked to the mantel and lifted Grace's photo. In it she holds a newborn Mark, both of them lit from within like a fresh filament. One corner of the frame is chipped. I've never fixed it. Some things should keep their honest scars. "I'm sorry," I told her, "for letting our boy forget who he is. I'm going to reconnect the line." The phone rang again. "Mark, Dad, I heard you called the caterer. Why are you complicating this? Just sign and let us handle it." "Mark, are you listening to yourself? You've barred me from your wedding and then signed me up to pay for it. You attached my name to vendor contracts without asking. You've turned your back on people who love you because they don't upgrade your image. When did you become someone I don't recognize? Silence. When he finally spoke, he sounded younger than he has in years. Madison said you wouldn't understand where we are now, the expectations we're under. I understand too well. You're trying to buy acceptance from people who will never see you as more than an amusing addition to their dinner parties. You're trading family and integrity to do it. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. And you're about to learn the difference between funding someone's dreams and enabling their delusions. I ended the call before he could answer. Anger burns out. Boundaries hold. Then I rang my financial advisor. David Chen, it's Jim. I need a restricted escrow. I want precise control over what gets paid and when. Understood, he said. Vendors submit invoices. You approve in writing. Funds release. No approval, no disbursement. Exactly. I emailed him a file titled Declaration of Payment Control Washington Wedding with an attachment, Vendor List Plus, Terms to Enforce, PDF. As I hit send, the pendulum clock marked out 8 slow beats. A long night was just beginning, but I had finally flipped the right breaker. I wasn't smashing tables. I was opening circuits, tracing loads, and rerouting current. If they wanted to power a spectacle with my money, they were about to discover what happens when the man at the panel says, "No authorization, no amperage." By the next morning, clarity arrived with the coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad the color of egg yolk and started sketching lines and junctions the way I've always done with wiring diagrams. Steam fogged my glasses. I tapped the table 3 times with a fingernail, a habit from years of touching live panels only after I'd grounded my nerves. Every system has weak points. Apply pressure in the right place and you redirect the whole flow. Mark and Madison had built their wedding like a cardboard house, pretty unstable, one humid day away from collapse. I drew 3 columns on the pad: safety, essential, showpiece. Then I began sliding each expense into its lane. Lighting basics, essential. Food liability insurance, safety. Drone footage, showpiece. PR retainers, showpiece. Floral installations taller than a child, showpiece. Next to the grid I scribbled the failure points: non-refundable deposits, wire before service timelines, no substitution clauses, the 3 anchor bolts of the entire spectacle. The card to pull wasn't feelings. It was advance cash flow. My first call was to David Chen, my financial advisor. We've worked together for nearly 15 years. Ever since Grace's diagnosis taught me the value of someone who understands both money and emergencies. "Jim, good to hear your voice," he said. "How can I help?" "I want a restricted escrow," I said, slow and exact. 2 keys. Vendors submit invoices I approve in writing from my email funds release. No written approval, no money. This is wedding related. My son thinks he can spend my money without my permission. I need him to learn how contracts actually work. David gave a soft chuckle. I've seen this before, kids with privilege who assume a parent's wallet is a communal asset. What gets paid? Basics that keep people safe and fed. Electricity, liability coverage, reasonable catering. No decor for decor's sake. No media kits. No paid content days. No drones. If it doesn't nourish bodies or protect guests, I'm not funding it. Smart boundaries, he said. I'll have documents ready this afternoon. You'll control what is paid and when. I hung up and called Darren Turner back. Overnight, he'd left a voicemail that spiked my blood pressure. "Mr. Washington," he said now, paper rustling on his end. I dug around. This isn't just expensive, it's being orchestrated as a media event. Madison hired a PR specialist to pitch lifestyle magazines. They're branding it a modern love story and planning a coordinated social push. A publicist for a wedding, I said, tightening my grip on the phone. What else? The venue's wait list is 6 months, but they bumped someone using Madison's family connections. The caterer's pouring a wine pair that costs more per bottle than most folks' grocery bill for a month. And they've booked a licensed drone operator for aerial footage, hero shots of the grounds and the guests. From what I'm hearing, Madison wants footage she can use later, sizzle reel stuff. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. Grace would have been appalled. She believed a wedding was a promise, spoken before people who loved you, not a cinematic launch. Darren, I said, can you pull internal timelines, vendor payment schedules, deposit deadlines, consequences for late wires? I'll try. These top-shelf vendors are strict. Miss a payment window and they cut you loose faster than a hotline trip. Good, I said. Let them be strict. Strict is honest. When we hung up, I opened my laptop and drafted what I titled my Declaration of Financial Independence. It was a simple document, written in language any lawyer would respect and any judge would enforce. I, Jim Washington, set the following conditions on any financial involvement in the Washington-Richardson wedding. First, all expenses must receive my written approval prior to any commitment. Second, my financial participation guarantees my presence and participation as the groom's father. Third, no funds will be disbursed for decorative, promotional, or media-related expenses. Fourth, any breach of these terms immediately voids all financial obligations. I added a severability clause, and a notice provision. Email counts as notice. Violations trigger an instant stop pay. I printed 3 copies, signed them all, and slid one into the small safe where Grace used to keep her jewelry. The second went into a brown file folder. I stuck a post-it on the third. Deliver to, venue divided by catering divided by planner. Then I set phone reminders: 2 o'clock, send to venue, 2:30, send to catering, 3, send to planner, paper, not shouting, ink, not tears. At 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Madison on my porch, immaculate as ever in an outfit that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She held a goldenrod folder and wore the expression of someone accustomed to getting what she wants, with charm fortified by persistence. I opened the door but did not move aside. Sun sifted under the awning, turning dust into glitter between us. The threshold made an honest boundary in a conversation that had never had one. James, we need to talk, she said. We can talk right here. Her smile faltered but held. This is about the wedding, about Mark, about family. Surely we can sit like civilized people. Every time we sit like civilized people, I said, you work to convince me my presence would be an embarrassment. I prefer standing. The mask slipped a fraction. I know there have been misunderstandings. There haven't, I said. You don't want me at your wedding, I heard you clearly, but you do want my money. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a business proposal. She opened her folder and produced a glossy brochure. I want you to see what we're creating. This isn't just a wedding, it's a celebration of all Mark has achieved. The venue, the guest list, the photography, they reflect the life he's built. I glanced at the brochure. Harbor View Estate looked like a film set: columns, manicured gardens, a place where real people feel like intruders. Let me ask you something, I said. In all these plans, these photos, these guest lists, these media packages, where exactly is love, the reason people get married? Where is it in this brochure? She blinked, composure softening at the edges. Everything we're doing is about love. We're celebrating our relationship, our future. You're celebrating your image, I said. There's a difference. You don't understand where Mark is now, she said, voice lowering to an executive whisper. The people he works with, the opportunities that come from being seen in the right place with the right people. This isn't just about us. It's about his career, our future, our family. Family is so important, I said, that you invite it to the wedding. Silence spread between us like a spill. When she spoke again, her tone carried a persuasion I hadn't heard before. James, I'm trying to be delicate. Mark and I have worked very hard to build something beautiful, something meaningful. We can't have elements that don't fit the aesthetic we've created. Elements, I said. Is that me? You're a man who spent 40 years in coveralls, she said carefully. Our friends are doctors, lawyers, executives. There's a level of refinement they expect. There it was, the dance she'd done for 2 years. I wasn't unwelcome for anything I'd done. I was unwelcome for who I was, A black man who had pulled himself up on honest work, not inheritance. A presence that reminded people Mark hadn't always lived where the wine cost more than most folks' rent. "Let me tell you a little about refinement," I said. "Refined people don't exclude the man who raised the groom. Refined people don't send invoices to those they've barred from attending. Refined people understand love isn't a brand to be managed." Color climbed her cheeks. "Fine. You want to be stubborn? Mark told me you'd be difficult. He said you never understood his ambition. Did he tell you about the second mortgage I took to pay his tuition, the pickup truck I sold to cover Grace's hospital bills, the 60-hour weeks so he could build those ambitions? That's the past," she said coolly. "That's what love is," I said. "Not a photo shoot, not a guest list curated to maximize networking. Love is sacrifice that doesn't ask for applause." She slipped the brochure back into her folder. "I came to invite you in to help you see what we're trying to accomplish. But if you're going to be bitter about choices that don't involve you, maybe it's best you stay home." "Maybe it is," I said. "But if I stay home, my money stays home with me." Her eyes sharpened. "What does that mean?" I held up my phone and enlarged David Chen's email. Subject: Escrow active vendor payments require written authorization. J. Washington. It means every vendor on your list now needs my written approval before they see a cent. It means the ad campaign doesn't get funded. It means your drone flies on someone else's dime. "You can't do that." "I just did. Mark put my name on those vendor agreements as primary financial contact. That gives me legal authority over what gets paid and what doesn't." The last of her composure cracked. "You selfish old man. Do you know what you're destroying? The connections we've built, the opportunities this creates?" "I'm not destroying anything," I said. "I'm drawing a boundary. Build your ladder if you want, just don't expect the man you've disinvited to finance it." "Mark will never forgive you," she said. "Maybe. But he'll respect me, and right now, I'll take respect over forgiveness." She pivoted back to her high heels. The sharp clack on the concrete sounded like a countdown. When she drove off, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, the satisfaction of a line drawn clean and held. My phone rang almost immediately. Mark's voice came tight with frustration. "Dad, what did you say to Madison? She's furious." "I told her the truth," I said. "That love doesn't require a marketing campaign. She's trying to make something special for us. She's trying to make something special for her image. Those are not the same thing. The fact you can't tell the difference worries me more than anything else. Why are you making this so hard? We invited you to contribute so you could be part of something good. You invited my wallet. You disinvited me. If you don't understand why that's a problem, we've got issues bigger than seating charts." Silence stretched. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. "Dad, I'm stuck between you and Madison. I love you both." "Act like it," I said. "Stop treating me like an ATM and start treating me like your father." "What do you want from me?" "I want you to remember who you are, not the man Madison thinks you should be, the man Grace and I raised." Another pause. "I need to think." "Good," I said. "Thinking is what adults do before they decide." After he hung up, I opened my laptop and queued the vendor emails. Effective immediately. No verbal commitments, all invoices to escrow, decorative divided by media expenses rejected. I requested acknowledgments from each vendor. Anyone who didn't respond within 24 hours would get a direct call. I wasn't blocking money. I was establishing rules for the current. That evening, Darren called with fresh intelligence. "Mr. Washington, I spoke with someone at Premier. They're nervous. The event's so elaborate they want an extra week of prep, but Harborview won't grant exclusivity until payment lands. If your escrow holds the deposit, they may have to shrink the menu." "Good," I said. "Maybe my son will eat real food instead of architectural presentations." "One more thing," Darren added. "The Platinum Photography team? They're not just shooting a wedding. They're producing content for Madison's personal brand launch, a lifestyle blog. Working title sounds like Elevated Living. The wedding is basically her portfolio." I closed my eyes against the ache behind them. "Start documenting," I said. "Screenshots, photos, notes, proof that this was never about love. I have a feeling I'll need it. Already on it, he said. And for what it's worth, Grace would be proud you're standing where it matters. After we hung up, I straightened Grace's picture on the mantel the way you level a bubble in a sight glass adjust until the center finds itself again. Outside, the wind teased her old chimes. Inside, the house settled into a quiet I trusted. From now on, every dollar leaving my wallet would carry a passport-stamped respect. The wedding was 5 weeks out. And with every day Mark delayed choosing between his father's values and Madison's ambition, the tuition for his lesson got more expensive. Wednesday didn't arrive with a sunrise. It arrived like an alarm. My phone pulsed on the counter names stacking across the screen like red LEDs on a control panel about to trip. Mark called first, voice modulated into the practiced cadence of someone who's been coached. "Dad, I've been thinking about our talk. Maybe we can find common ground." I poured coffee, took my seat at the kitchen table. "I'm listening. If we scale back a few details, lose the drone, trim the florals, but we do need full-service catering and the photography package. Those are investments in our future." "When?" I asked. "Did food become an investment? When did photos become a business strategy?" "You don't understand the world I work in," he said. "Image matters. People who can move my career will be at the wedding. First impressions are everything. And what impression do you want to make that you're a man borrowing money you can't repay to impress people who don't know you?" Silence. Then the defensive pivot. "I can make it back. I'm up for a promotion next month, and Madison is getting a raise. We're covered." "What promotion? What raise? You're counting chickens that never hatched, son." "Dad, just sign. Please do it for me, for Mom's memory, for our family." "Don't bring Grace into this to strong-arm me," I said, a tightness in my throat. "She believed in living within your means and treating people with respect, including the family members who don't fit the new aesthetic." "Mom wanted me to succeed," he said. "She wanted me to be kind. There's a difference." An hour later, Madison arrived without texting first. No greetings, just a crisp posture and a phone in her hand. "James, we need to resolve this immediately. Vendors are calling about payment timelines. It's embarrassing." "For whom?" I asked. "For all of us. You want people to think Mark's family can't afford his wedding? I want people to know Mark has principles. If that embarrasses you, reconsider your values, not my bank account." She held her phone up. A grid of messages: florist, photographer, venue coordinator, each line polished and professional, each line carrying the scent of rising anxiety. "See? Everyone wants confirmation. You're creating chaos." "This isn't chaos," I said, scrolling through her screen. "This is accountability. Every business runs on cash flow, and every vendor should know who actually authorizes the checks. But you're the authorized party. Your name is on the contracts." "My name was placed on contracts I never signed. Big difference." Her composure thinned. "What exactly do you want? Money? More control? A bigger role in planning?" "I want my son back," I said. "The one who called every Sunday, remembered my birthday, and didn't treat his father like a shameful secret." "You're overreacting, James. Nothing has changed between you and Mark." "Everything has. He used to value my opinion. Now he dodges my calls. He used to bring girlfriends over. He hid you for 6 months. He used to talk about a future. Now he talks about a business plan." Her phone chimed. She glanced down. "It's Kyle Shaw, our planner. He wants to meet this afternoon to discuss budget realities. He only takes referrals, very discreet, very professional. He's handled weddings for some of the most prominent families in Charlotte." A word like discreet in Madison's mouth sounded like paper trail optional. When she left, I dialed Darren. "Find out who Kyle Shaw really is." An hour later he called back. "Mr. Washington, Kyle isn't just a planner. He's what folks call a lifestyle facilitator. He arranges short-term financing through private lenders so people can perform a life they can't afford. Think payday loans in tuxedos. He takes a cut of everything." "You're telling me Mark borrowed for this wedding?" "I'm telling you, Kyle's specialty is helping ambitious young couples pretend until they can pay. Problem is, most never can. Based on the vendors I've heard Madison mention, we're talking 60 to 80,000, maybe more." I hung up and called David Chen. Run Mark's credit full report, recent activity, everything. Jim, not without his permission. Then call him for it. Tell him his father needs a clear picture of his finances before committing to anything. If he refuses, that tells me what I need to know. Mark called within the hour, voice tight with anger. Why are you checking my credit? Don't you trust me? Trust is built, I said, and you haven't been building any lately. That's insulting. I'm an adult with a good job and a bright future. Then you won't mind letting me review my financials with you. Silence spread between us. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. There might be some temporary cash flow issues. Define temporary. Kyle arranged a bridge loan to cover vendor deposits. That's how weddings at this level work. Everyone does it. How much? $75,000. The number hit like a body shot. That's more than some people earn in a year, Mark. It's an investment in our future. Madison's family expects a certain standard. And if you don't get the promotion, if her raise is delayed, if the economy dips and you're stuck servicing a debt you can't retire, you're being negative, Dad. It'll work out. Famous last words of everyone who ever went broke. That afternoon, Kyle Shaw called to arrange a meeting. His voice carried the gentle confidence of a man who specializes in expensive problems. Mr. Washington, I understand there have been confusions about vendor authorization. I'd be happy to walk you through our payment structure. I'll meet, I said, with my financial advisor present. Of course, transparency is essential in these arrangements. We met in Kyle's uptown office, where money wore soft leather and mahogany. Abstract art on the walls likely cost more than my truck did when it was new. Kyle was exactly as advertised: immaculate suit, smooth cadence, perfectly at ease with other people's money. Thank you for coming, Mr. Washington. I want to assure you that your son's loan is perfectly transparent. We specialize in bridging between current income and future earning potential. What's the rate? I asked. Our pricing is competitive for a specialized service, he smiled. That's not an answer, David said, leaning in. What's the annual rate on Mark's note? 18%. I nearly choked. 18? You joking? It's a short-term facility, maximum 6 months, Kyle said smoothly. Once Mark is promoted, he'll refinance through traditional channels. And if he isn't, I said, we're confident in his prospects. Should outcomes vary, we'll structure a payment plan that protects all parties. David and I traded a look. We both knew the subtext: legal action, liens, credit wreckage, the usual end to confusing aspiration with assurance. I want to see the loan documents, I said. I'm afraid those are confidential between us and Mark. Then this meeting is over. I stood. Kyle lifted a placating hand. Perhaps we can reach an accommodation. If you guarantee a portion of the obligation, we could restructure on more favorable terms. You want me to co-sign my son's fantasy? Think of it as endorsing his ambition. I think of it as underwriting his delusion. We left without another word. That evening the vendors began to close ranks. John at Premier Catering wanted payment confirmation. Harborview wanted deposit verification. The Platinum Photo team wanted contract clarifications. Polite, firm, insistent. Money must move, or services would stop. I sent a single message to all. Submit your invoices to my escrow. If I approve, you'll be paid within 24 hours. If I don't, seek alternate funding. Subject line: payment protocol in effect, no verbal authorization. PDF attached, my terms. By Friday, pressure spiked. Madison called twice. Mark called 3 times. Kyle left 2 voicemails. The pattern never changed: plead, reason, bargain, threaten. Dad, you're sabotaging my wedding. I'm teaching you consequences. Madison's parents are asking whether we can meet our obligations. Can you? With your help, yes. That's not the same as being able. Friday night Darren rang with news. Harborview's nervous. Payments are behind. They're making a contingency plan. If it's not resolved by Wednesday, they may release the date to another client. Good, I said. Let them. Real life runs on real deadlines. Saturday morning brought the most desperate call yet. Mark's voice was raw. Dad, please. Just this once. I'm begging you. Help me and I swear I'll make it right. Son, I've been helping you all your life. Tuition, car down payment, first house deposit, hospital bills when I didn't yet have insurance. When did we start calling this just this once? This is different. End note. How? Because if you don't help, I lose everything. Madison, the wedding, my standing at the firm, everything. Maybe losing all that isn't the worst thing that could happen. Maybe it's the only thing that teaches you who you really are. Silence deepened until I could hear my own breath. I never thought my own father would abandon me, he whispered. I'm not abandoning you. I'm refusing to rescue you from choices you made without me. There's a difference. What am I supposed to do? Tell Madison the truth about your finances. Scale the wedding to what you can actually afford. Stop trying to impress people who don't care enough to accept you as you are. And if Madison leaves, you'll know she was never your person. After the call, I sat in the kitchen and stared at Grace's photo. Hard love is the hardest to give because you must stand still and watch someone you love meet consequences you could prevent. But preventing them means endorsing what caused them. The phone rang again. Kyle, and the polish in his voice had turned rough. Mr. Washington, we must address Mark's situation. Vendors are threatening to walk. Then, Mark needs to make decisions. With respect, you're forcing decisions through financial pressure. That's unfair to a young couple. You extended money he can't repay so he could stage a wedding he can't afford to impress people who don't know him. Don't lecture me about fair. You're helping him buy a dream with borrowed cash. When reality arrives, you'll keep your fees and he'll keep the debt. Perhaps we can arrange a plan that satisfies everyone, he said. Here's my plan. Mark cancels the loan, shrinks the wedding, and learns to live within his means. Go find another Mark. I hung up and called my lawyer. Thomas Harrison, draft a letter. I am not financially responsible for any debt my son incurs without my written consent. Include a cease and desist. No one uses my name as guarantor. CC the planner, the venue, and the caterer. Jim, what's going on? My son is learning the difference between want and afford. I'm making sure his tuition isn't billed to me. The battle lines were visible now. On one side, Mark, Madison, and Kyle, determined to chase a vision of success powered by borrowed money and the exclusion of inconvenient family. On the other, me with nothing but principles and the willingness to enforce them. 4 weeks to the wedding. Something would have to give. My only hope was that when it did, my son would land on bedrock and not in the cardboard house he'd built with other people's money. Monday's call told me the situation had shifted from complicated to critical. Kyle Shaw's voice had shed its showroom polish. Mr. Washington, we have a serious problem. Harborview Estate is threatening to release the date unless they receive full payment by Wednesday. That's 48 hours. We're short $48,000. On his end, I heard the click-click of a pen and the measured footfalls of a man pacing for leverage. I glanced at the wall clock 7:12 and drew a hard box on my yellow pad. Harborview due, wed 5 p.m., $48K. With respect, he added, this touches your son's reputation as much as his finances. If word spreads that the Washington Richardson wedding was canceled for non-payment, it will follow Mark for years. I set my coffee cup down with a clean clack. Are you threatening me, Mr. Shaw? I'm explaining consequences. Charlotte's social circuits are smaller than you think. People talk. Let them. I kept my voice even. Maybe they'll say Mark tried to live past his means and his father refused to enable it. I've worked with dozens of families in similar circumstances, he pressed. There's always a way to preserve everyone's dignity. Whose dignity? Yours and Madison's. Mark's dignity went out the door when he borrowed money he can't repay to impress people who won't remember his middle name. His tone hardened. I'm trying to help your son. No. You're trying to protect your commission. Different things. I ended the call. Then I phoned Darren Turner. How fast can you get to Harborview? 20 minutes. Why? I want eyes on the ground. If they're really preparing to cancel, there will be tells signage, a staff huddle, replacement hold calls. Photograph what you can. Note times. I'm on my way. An hour later, he whispered into the phone from the corridor. "It's real, Mr. Washington," the coordinator just said. "October 28th may open up due to a payment complication," and she pulled up the wait list. I wrote 2 lines beneath my box. Contract equals real. Grace period equals none. By noon, Madison called, panic fraying the edges of her rooftop bar voice. Behind her, the hiss of an espresso machine, glass on glass, the soundscape of places where people trade stories about other people. "James, Kyle says you're refusing to guarantee the venue. Do you understand what this means? It means actions have consequences. It means social suicide. Do you know who's slated to attend? Partners from Mark's firm. Clients. People who can make or break careers. If we have to send a cancellation notice, we will be laughed at." A question, Madison. If these are truly Mark's friends and colleagues, won't they understand financial realities? Might they not respect him for making responsible choices? The world doesn't work like that. Your world doesn't. That's different. Her voice tightened. "You're destroying everything we've built. What you've built is a paper tower. I'm just refusing to keep it upright with borrowed wind. Mark will never forgive you. Maybe, but he'll get over it. And one day, he might thank me." I hung up and let the house go quiet. In my neighborhood, men like me are judged less by photos posted than by bills paid. Charlotte is small that way, small enough to remember who kept their word and who kept a running tab. By late afternoon, Darren checked in once more. "Staff here is using words like release the date and alternate hold. They're serious." "Good," I said. "Contract language is unemotional. It keeps time better than people do." That evening, Kyle tried again, the smoothness back but thinner, like veneer over particle board. "Mr. Washington, there must be a middle path, some way to protect appearances. Dignity isn't a line item with a 10% service fee," I said. "It comes from correct decisions, not expensive optics." He pivoted to the familiar script reputation, optics, community chatter. I let him finish, then gave him mine. "I won't buy face saving by the hour." When the line went dead, the kitchen filled with the soft tick of the clock and the faint clink of Grace's wind chime on the porch. I pictured Mark hearing words he didn't want and finally meeting a deadline that didn't blink. He might be furious today. Tomorrow he might stand a little straighter. Forgiveness is a feeling. Respect is a habit. I'm teaching my son the habit. Tuesday delivered the confrontation I dreaded and, in some corner of myself, invited. Mark called and asked me to meet at Meridian Park, the place Grace and I used to bring him to feed the ducks when his legs were too short for the footbridge. Morning wind combed the row of elms. Wet grass lifted a clean mineral smell. On the pond, ducks tucked their wings like commas drifting across a page. Mark was already there, hunched on the bench where Grace used to read him stories. He looked older than 32, drawn by strain and a sequence of impossible choices. "Dad, we need to fix this." I sat beside him and said nothing. Sometimes silence makes room for the truth. I counted 5 slow breaths. On the 6th, he finally looked up, just as a yellow leaf skittered onto his shoe. "Kyle says the venue's gone unless we pay by tomorrow. Madison has been crying for 2 days. Her mother called this morning to ask if we needed help. It was humiliating." "What did you tell her, Mother?" "That we had it handled." "Do we?" His eyes slid to the pond. The ducks cut lazy ovals on the skin of the water. "No." "When did you stop telling me the truth, Mark? And when did you start being ashamed of it?" "Ashamed of what?" "Of needing help. Of not being as successful as you pretend. Of dating a woman whose family has more money than ours." He scrubbed his palms on his trousers, watching a lone duck fall behind the flock. "I was afraid asking for help would make me a kid again, so I borrowed to look like a man." "Grown men aren't the ones who never need anyone," I said. "They're the ones who call their needs by their right names." He swallowed. "I thought the loan would buy time to catch up to the image, the lifestyle." "To something that doesn't exist," I said. "What you're chasing is a filtered picture. The only receipt for it is debt." He let that sit. When he spoke again, his voice was thin, nearly lost to the breeze. "I love her, Dad. I know you don't get why, but I do. I get loving someone. I don't get sacrificing yourself to keep them happy. She isn't asking you to sacrifice yourself, is she? I kept my tone even. She asked you to exclude your father from your wedding. She asked you to borrow money you can't repay. She asked you to pretend to be a man you're not. What part of you is left over? He folded forward, fingers clasped at the back of his neck until the knuckles went white. I don't know anymore. Then maybe it's time to find out. We sat with the water and the wind and a bench that still knew the weight of Grace's stories. The park hadn't changed, only we had trading fairy tales for grown-up math. That night the last assault began. Madison first, then Mark, then Kyle Shaw, each call running the same 4-act script: pleading, bargaining, threatening, attacking. You're a bitter old man who can't stomach your son's success. You're sabotaging Mark out of jealousy. You're proving Madison was right about your character. I let the accusations pass without defense. Sometimes truth speaks loudest when you refuse to argue with a lie. In my notebook I drew a thin line and labeled the acts: plead, for family; bargain, cut the drone; keep the catering; threat, public embarrassment; attack, you're envious. When the 4th act started, I answered with silence. Wednesday morning brought the call I'd been expecting. A calm, professional voice, clockwork steady. No heat. Mr. Washington, this is Tricia from Harbor View Events. We'll need to move October 28th to our wait list unless payment arrives by 5 o'clock today. I understand, I said. Business is business. Will payment be made? Not by me. Should I notify the wedding party? That's your decision. My son made financial commitments without securing funds. Consequences belong to him. I circled 5 o'clock in red on the wall calendar, an expected impact point where fantasy meets the floor. At 3, Mark called, breath ragged. Dad, they canceled the venue. Madison locked herself in the bedroom. Her parents are driving up from Richmond. This is a disaster. This isn't a disaster, I said, pouring more water into the kettle and listening to the honest, unharmonized burble of a boil. It's reality arriving on schedule. How can you be calm about this? Because we planned for it. You can't frame dreams with borrowed studs and expect the house to stand. What do I do now? Make different choices, better ones. Like what? First, kill the loan before the interest kills your credit. Get it in writing. Second, redesign the day inside your actual means. A ceremony you can afford, witnessed by people who love you, not by people who love a backdrop. Third, marry Madison, if you love her, not because her network sparkles. If she'll stand with you at a courthouse with 2 witnesses, you'll know the love is real. If she won't marry you without a grand performance, you'll know exactly what she loved. He didn't answer right away. On the gravel path our 2 shadows lay side by side, one straight, one a little crooked, but both pointing toward the same parking lot. I touched the back slat of the bench where Grace had once rested, a paperback in her lap. The paint had peeled, showing old wood beneath. Time keeps what matters. I don't choose easy, Mark, I said. I choose right. And we fact, honesty isn't soft, but it is a road home. Thursday delivered news I hadn't counted on. Darren Turner called with a find that shifted the ground under our feet. Mr. Washington, I've got something. Madison met with a real estate agent. For what? Condos. Pricey ones. Glass towers uptown with skyline views, places that run at about twice Mark's annual salary. My gut cinched. You sure? Sure enough to send pictures. 3 images landed a breath later. Madison's reflection in the glass doors of Pinnacle Properties. A reception desk with a folder stamped pre-approval. An elevator yawning open beside a placard that read, Skyline Penthouse Tour. Darren added a text. Pre-approval. Conditional on household income. Agent asked about family support. My cousin in lending confirmed it. Condos in the clouds. Money from my pocket. The pattern finished itself. Wedding PR condo. Under it I underlined the only proposed power source. Dad. This wasn't a home she was hunting. It was a funding model. The wedding had never been an end. It was a down payment on a future I was expected to subsidize. I called Mark. Son, we need to talk in person. Now. Dad, I can't take another lecture about fiscal responsibility. This isn't about responsibility. It's about Madison's actual plan for your marriage. Something in my voice must have cut through because he showed up within the half hour. At the kitchen table, I slid the prints across the wood. Madison entering Pinnacle. Madison shaking hands with a broker. Madison touring units that cost more than most people's houses. I pinched to zoom on one frame, her palm on a folder labeled Debt to Income Worksheet. Mark leafed through until his nail stopped at a line item he'd never seen in their planning. HOA fees. I don't understand, he said, and his voice said he did. Your fiancée has been shopping for a lifestyle she expects you to underwrite, I said. The wedding isn't a capstone, it's the kickoff. He studied the photos long enough for the clock to tick a dozen times. When he finally looked up, there was a hurt in his eyes I hadn't seen before. You think she planned this from the beginning? I think Madison met a promising young man with access to family money and made strategic choices accordingly. That's a terrible thing to say about someone. It's a worse thing to do to someone. He walked to the window and stared into Grace's small garden, the one I still keep weeded because love deserves maintenance. When he turned back, he wore the drained expression of a man who realizes the load on his shoulders was never his to carry. Dad, what if you're right? What if everything I thought was real was leverage? Then you'll have learned one of the most important lessons in time to use it. And if I'm wrong, Madison will prove me wrong by staying when the money doesn't. Friday brought a test neither of us wanted but both of us needed. Mark called Madison and told the simple truth. The venue was canceled. The bridge loan was canceled. The wedding would have to shrink drastically or be postponed indefinitely. He CC'd me on a short email. We're canceling the loan and scaling down. No escrow access for new bookings. Her response, by Mark's account, was immediate and revealing. She didn't ask how he was holding up. She didn't offer to help find alternatives. Her first question was whether my escrow could still be used to lock a smaller venue. When he said no, she said perhaps they should pause everything until it can be done properly. By properly, she meant expensively. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her if she loved me, the scale wouldn't matter, that we could get married at City Hall with 2 witnesses, and it would mean the same. And she said that proves I don't understand what marriage represents socially. Saturday morning he arrived with a worn manila envelope and the look of someone who'd spent the night deciding things that hurt. Dad, I need you to see something. Inside was the original seating chart for the wedding that wouldn't be. I'd seen guest lists before. This was different. Not just names and tables, an engineered network. Table 1, Madison's parents and their country club circle. Table 2, partners from Mark's firm and their spouses. Table 3, local business leaders Madison hoped to cultivate. In the margins, pencil notes. Place influencers near media table. Warm intros during dessert. Down at the bottom, a tiny boxed section marked family obligations, like a line item in a budget. Table 7 carried 4 seats precisely. Mark's aunt and uncle from Durham, a cousin he barely knew, and, printed so small it felt like a legal disclaimer, a line that froze my blood. Father's seat TBD pending contribution resolution. Even in their own wedding, my presence existed only if my compliance did. Mark, I said quietly, tapping table 7. He followed my finger. The expressions crossed his face, one after another: confusion, recognition, then a clarity that hurt to watch. She was never going to seat you unless you paid, was she? It appears not. Dad, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to yourself for agreeing to be treated that way. He folded the chart carefully and slid it back into the envelope, as if handling a document you only touch once. When he looked at me again, I saw something I hadn't seen in 2 years, my son. The real one, without the mask Madison helped him craft. What do I do now? You decide who you want to be. With or without Madison. With or without debt. With or without the image she's been selling you. I handed him a page from my yellow pad. At the top I'd written 3 lines. No debt, no conditions, no pretending. It'll hurt, I said. Growing up always does. But the alternative is staying a child. And children don't keep marriages. He nodded. I'll talk to her without your wallet in my pocket. Good. He left that afternoon to have what he called the most important conversation of his life. Truer words, I thought, had rarely been spoken. Growing up is returning the mask and keeping your face. 3 weeks after Madison's financial sleight of hand was exposed, I got a call that shifted the board again. Mark's voice carried a mixture I hadn't heard before, spent but steadied. Dad, Madison's father drove back from Richmond. She wants to move forward with the wedding. I folded the morning paper and slid it under my coffee cup to keep the ring off the table, an old engineer's habit of ordering messy inputs before they short a circuit. What wedding? I canceled everything. She says she's found new funding. Her parents will cover the costs if we scale to something manageable. She claims she's booked a smaller venue for this Saturday. And you said? I said I needed to think. She's acting like none of the money stuff happened, as if hidden accounts and invented invoices were just misunderstandings. What do you want to do, son? I want to see who she is with pressure on, if she's changed or if she's just better at hiding. That's a dangerous game, Mark. I know, but I need to know before I can live with myself. That afternoon, Madison phoned me directly, voice bright in the way sales reps brighten cheer sprayed over rust. I heard keys clacking and paper shuffling in the background, someone reading a script, not telling the truth. Jim, I want to personally invite you to our wedding this Saturday. I know there have been misunderstandings, but Mark and I are determined to start fresh. What wedding would that be? I was under the impression everything was canceled. We found a lovely spot in Davidson, more private, far more in line with a realistic budget, just family and close friends. It suits our new beginning perfectly. And precisely where do I fit in this new beginning? You're Mark's father. Of course you're included. Let me be blunt, Madison. Do you actually want me there, or do you simply want a record that I declined? A pause half a beat too long, the lag time of calculated speech. Family is important to both of us, Jim. That's not an answer. Of course we want you there. When she hung up, I called Darren. I need eyes on a venue in Davidson. Madison says it's set for Saturday. I'm on it. Gut says what? Gut says she's still rigging the game, new rules, same trick. 2 hours later he rang back with the ledger I expected. Mr. Washington, no wedding venue in Davidson is booked for the date. I called a dozen. Nothing under Richardson, Washington, or anything adjacent. Go to. You sure? Sure enough to write it down. I'll widen the circle, Cornelius, Huntersville. Davidson is smoke, I said. Find the fire somewhere else. That evening Mark arrived, looking more bewildered than I'd yet seen him. Dad, something's off. Madison keeps changing Saturday's details. First it was a garden ceremony, then indoors. Now maybe her parents' house in Richmond. I asked to see the contracts, vendor agreements, confirmations, anything in writing. She says her parents are handling everything directly, so I won't have to worry about details. When the details go foggy, I said, people often ask sentiment to be the flashlight. Don't do it. Demand email, contracts, receipts. Real love doesn't fear transparency. Friday night, the call I had been anticipating finally came. This time the mask was gone. Jim, plans have shifted. We've decided on a private ceremony. Just Mark, me, my parents, and the officiant. Intimate, meaningful. Mark is fully on board after everything. We need to focus on what matters, our commitment without outside distractions. Outside distractions, I said. Is that what you call a man's father? You've been very clear about our relationship. We don't want negativity on our day. I ended the call and immediately rang Mark. He picked up on the first ring. Madison just told me you can't attend tomorrow because you're not well. That's strange. She just told me you've chosen a private ceremony with no family. Silence gathered on the line until it felt like a room. Dad, she lied to both of us. Yes. What do I do? Whatever you do, do it with your eyes open. Saturday morning I made a decision equal parts risky and necessary. I drove toward Davidson to see what Madison had actually built. If there was a wedding, I'd witness it. If there wasn't, I'd learn which game she was playing. The breadcrumb trail led not to Davidson but to a small event space across the town line, Riverside Gardens in Cornelius. I found it by following a string of white balloons and Madison's carefully vague social posts. Number new beginnings, number intimate vows, no venue tags, of course. I parked across the street and watched the arrivals like an inventory clerk. One small catering truck, one florist van, a lone photographer hauling his own lights, not the platinum crew she'd once courted. The props had changed, the script hadn't. At 10:30, Mark pulled in, a man walking toward his own sentencing. He stood in the lot 5 full minutes, then squared his shoulders and went inside. I waited 10 more, then crossed and walked through the front doors of Riverside Gardens as if my name were printed on the program. The room was simple and attractive. White chairs in short rows, modest sprays of flowers, a small arch where vows would be traded. Maybe 40 people. I recognized none of them except Madison's parents. Near the entrance, a makeshift seating chart sat on an easel A3 paper, a few names inked, several boxes blank, enough space for excuses, not enough for a father. Madison stood greeting guests, a white dress draped neatly over a plan that no longer fit it. When she saw me, a set of expressions skittered across her face: surprise, anger, arithmetic, then a thin layer of manners. "Jim, what a delightful surprise. I thought you were unwell." "I feel fine, looking forward to my son's wedding." "I'm not sure we have room for you. The list was finalized, given your regrets." "Then I'll stand." Her mother slid beside her, a woman who'd spent a lifetime managing rooms with a perfume of charm and the steel of implication. "Mr. Washington, lovely to meet you. I suspect there's been some confusion about today's arrangements." "On my end there hasn't. My son is about to be married, and I'm here to witness it." "Of course, but this is very intimate. We've planned carefully for a precise head count." "Then you should have planned for the groom's father." Madison's father joined, his handshake the kind that resolves problems by owning the air. "Mr. Washington, perhaps we can step outside and discuss this reasonably." "I am being reasonable. I'm attending my son's wedding. We structured this event with certain understandings about family participation," he said. "What understandings? That I'm unworthy of an invitation to my own son's wedding?" The conversation had gathered a corona of onlookers, guests peeking, whispers pooling. Madison's face flushed, equal parts embarrassment and fury. "Jim, you're creating a scene." "I'm stating a fact. You lied to Mark about refusing my attendance. You lied to me about Mark wanting a private ceremony. And now you want me to slip away quietly so no one wonders why the groom's father isn't welcome." That's when Mark appeared, pulled by the current of raised voices. When he saw me, something unclenched, a mix of relief, confusion, and yes, gratitude. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Showing up for my son. Madison said you couldn't make it." "Madison says many things that aren't true." Mark's gaze moved from me to Madison to her parents. In real time I watched the pieces lock. "Madison, did you tell my father he wasn't invited?" "Mark, we discussed this. We want the day to be close, not complicated." "We never discussed excluding my father. You said he's difficult about money." "Careful with money isn't difficult, and it's not a reason to bar him from my wedding." Madison's composure finally failed. "Then you'll choose. Either we do this my way with the people who support what we're building, or we do nothing." The silence that followed felt structural, like the pause before a beam gives. Everyone in the room knew they were watching a hinge moment in Mark's life. When he spoke, his voice was clear and level, the sound of a breaker being thrown. "Madison, he's my father. If you can't accept him, you can't accept me." "Don't be ridiculous. This isn't about accepting anyone, it's about maintaining standards." "Whose standards?" "Ours. The standards of the life we're trying to build together." "A life that doesn't include my family," Mark said, "isn't a life I want." The mask didn't slip then, it shattered. "Your family is embarrassing, Mark. Your father is a maintenance man who doesn't understand how the real world works. My friends are doctors, lawyers, executives. They expect a certain level of refinement. My father is a retired electrical engineer who put me through college," Mark answered. "He's the kindest man I know." "Kind doesn't get you invited to the right parties or introduced to the right people." "Then maybe we've been at the wrong parties," Mark said. meeting the wrong people. I watched my son have the conversation I'd hoped for 2 years. He'd have not with me, but with himself about what matters, what's real, what is kept, and what is cut away. Madison tried for one last pivot to control the narrative. If you humiliate me in front of my family and friends, there's no coming back from it. Good, Mark said softly, because I don't want to come back to this. He turned to the assembled guests and spoke so everyone could hear. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry to say there won't be a wedding today. Madison and I have fundamental differences about what marriage is, and it's better to face that now than after we make promises we can't keep. Silence fell hard. Madison's mother made a small noise, half gasp, half sob. Her father stared like a man calculating the cost of a public failure. Madison herself stood stock still, then found her voice for one final swing. You'll regret this, Mark. You're throwing away everything we built because of a man who couldn't even afford to pay for your wedding. No, Mark said, calm as a plumb line. I'm throwing away a dream to keep a relationship with someone who actually loves me. He stepped to me and offered his hand. Dad, want to get lunch? Suddenly, my days wide open. As we headed for the door, I heard Madison behind us telling guests the ceremony was postponed due to a family emergency. Even in defeat, she was revising the copy. In the parking lot, Mark paused and looked back at Riverside Gardens. People were drifting out, faces puzzled and pinched. Dad, did I just make the biggest mistake of my life? You just made the soundest decision of your life, I said. It doesn't feel sound, it feels terrifying. Fear, I told him, is the natural service charge on freedom. Pay it, and you walk lighter. We drove to a diner in Charlotte where the coffee is strong and the servers call everyone honey. Mark ordered eggs and bacon like a man who hadn't eaten in days. I ordered the same and watched my son loosen by degrees. Can I ask you something, Dad? Anything. How did you know Madison wasn't right for me? Because she wanted you ashamed of where you come from. People who love you don't ask you to erase your family. What if I never find someone who loves me for who I am? Then you'll be alone, I said, which is better by miles than being with someone who loves a persona they designed. The server topped off our cups. Her honey was cheap and warm in precisely the way all the morning's elegant words were not. I tapped my spoon once against the rim, one small, clean chime. The person worthy of you, I said, will honor your roots, not just like your polish. Outside, Charlotte moved along its ordinary Saturday, unaware that my son had just chosen integrity over acceptance, family over status, truth over display. The wedding that was supposed to cost $190,000 ended up costing the price of 2 breakfasts and the courage to say no to people who confuse money with love. It was the best investment either of us ever made. The fallout from the canceled wedding landed before Sunday sunup. By 8, my phone was buzzing with strangers who somehow felt entitled to an opinion about my son's private life. I let the calls roll to voicemail, each one the same bottle tossed into the tide. Just want to hear the other side. I had no obligation to fish any of them out. Madison's social accounts flared to life, cream beige slides with white text about family interference and toxic dynamics, a black and white photo of 2 clasped hands with no groom's face in the frame. Anonymous accounts slid into my inbox to inform me I'd humiliated Mark. I pinned one sentence at the top of my legal pad and underlined it twice. Truth doesn't humiliate. It removes the mask. Mark spent that Sunday at my house, in Grace's garden, where his body did what it had always known: pinch the suckers off tomato vines, tug weeds from the seams, snip dead blooms. While his mind worked through 2 decisive years, he'd finally weighed and measured. He pulled on Grace's old gardening gloves. The suede palms were smooth from use, the fit exact. I handed him a spool of soft tie. Loose, I said. Too tight and you break the stem. Only later did I hear what else I'd said. He kept working. Madison's father is telling people you threatened to cut me off if I married her. I straightened from Grace's tomatoes, the ones she babied every summer. What am I telling people? The truth that you realized you were about to marry someone who wanted you ashamed of your family. How do they take it? Mixed. Some think you're crazy to walk away from Madison. Others tell me they never understood what you saw in her." He clipped a shriveled blossom. The shears clicked like punctuation on a sentence long overdue. After a while, he said, "I spent 2 years trying to be someone better than who I am. I almost lost myself to the try." Monday flipped the story on its head. Darren called with information that threw Madison's recent behavior into a sharper and uglier frame. "Mr. Washington, I found why Madison was desperate to stage any ceremony yesterday," he said. "She sold an exclusive to Charlotte lifestyle, from humble beginnings to high society, a modern love story. The features slated for this month, wedding photos required." I sat down hard. So she was going to monetize the marriage. "Worse," Darren said. "They advanced her $5,000. It explains part of what vanished from the business account. She's not planning a wedding. She's planning a brand launch." "Does Mark know?" "Not yet. He should hear it from you." That evening, when Mark came by, I showed him Darren's foreword, a cheery editor asking when they could expect the deliverables, final interview, and wedding assets for the upcoming spread. Mark read it twice. Skepticism hardened into anger, then softened into something heavier. He thumb-zoomed the line with the due date. "Assets due by the 28th. Even vows have a filing deadline." A dry laugh. He turned the phone face down. I confused sharing with splitting the pot. I refilled his coffee. Steam fogged the window. As it thinned, it left flecks you could finally see to wipe away. Anger wants justice. Sadness settles for truth. What kind of person sells her own wedding to a magazine without telling her fiancé? He asked. "The kind who treats relationships as revenue opportunities," I said. Tuesday, Madison arrived without text or invitation. She looked smaller, like the weekend had let the air out of something she'd been holding up with willpower. "Jim, we need to talk." "We really don't." "Please, 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I led her into the kitchen, the same table where Mark canceled the bridge loan, where we traced the money trails, where months of performance finally met a switch that cut the power. She set a typed page on the wood grain, a pre-written statement, like she was about to brief a room. I slid it back. "We don't do press releases here. We do apologies. We do apologies. I want to explain what happened Saturday." It was clear. Explanation is surplus. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," she said. "My parents, my friends, everyone expected this wedding. I couldn't cancel without losing face. So you staged a substitute ceremony and barred the groom's father to save face. It wasn't fake. I love Mark. You love a version of him, a polished young professional who lifts your status. You never loved the man who comes with a father who wore a tool belt and a family that didn't summer at the club." "That's unfair," she said, composure cracking. "What's unfair is demanding a man put his family out with the recycling to be loved." "James, Mark has real potential," she said, recovering. "He needs guidance and refinement. He needs someone who understands how success actually works." "At the price of what?" I asked. "Integrity? Relationships? His own sense of self?" "You're being dramatic." "Am I, Madison? You siphoned money from a shared account, lied about business activity, tried to exclude his father from his wedding, and sold your love story to a magazine without telling him. If that's what success looks like, then failure is an upgrade." She stared at her hands for a long time. "What am I supposed to do now? Everyone knows the wedding was canceled. My reputation is in ruins." "Your reputation was built on spin. Maybe it's time to build something real." "That's easy for you to say. You don't understand my world." "You're right," I said. "I don't understand a world where love is a marketing channel and family is optional. I'm grateful Mark got out before he learned to understand it." She stood. The chair legs scraped a long, thin rip across the room, the sound of fabric tearing where it had been stretched too tight. She left without goodbye. I never saw her again. The week rolled on, carrying the debris of the spectacle with it. Madison's followers exchanged theories. Her mother's circle refined theirs. Strangers kept calling to weigh what they hadn't lifted. I went back to the garden. Mark returned each evening after work, and we said little. He tied vines with a gentler hand. He watered without drowning. He learned, without turning it into content, the tidy truth Grace's plot always taught. Pruning isn't punishment, it's care. Cut what's done so what's living can take the light. By Thursday, the inbox tempests had blown seaward. The house settled into its own metronome again. The tick of the clock on the wall, the thud of my boots by the door, the whisper of leaves catching in the carport screen. The world that had measured Mark by his guest list had moved on to another show. We had work worth keeping. For my part, when anyone asked in good faith, not for gossip, what happened, I gave the same simple answer every time. Mark chose dignity over display. He learned that potential without character is just a budget forecast, that standards without respect are a theater set, that success that requires you to erase your people isn't success, it's costume. And when he asked the only question that mattered, what you do after a mask falls, I told him, you don't chase it across the floor. You sweep. You open a window. You learn the room by its own air again. Thursday night, Mark and I finally had the conversation I'd been waiting on since the first crack formed in the facade. It wasn't about Madison Richardson, or money, or weddings. It was about the shape of the man he wanted to be from here on out. He sat at my kitchen table, turning a tiny loose screw he'd found on the wood, a nervous habit with purpose. "Dad," he said, "I've been thinking about what you told me about choosing the person I want to become. I want to be a man Mom Grace would be proud of. A man who treats people with respect, keeps his word, and doesn't pretend to be more than he is." "You already were that man," I said. "You just forgot for a while." "How do I make sure I don't forget again?" "By repeating what's right every day," I told him, tapping a thin scratch in the oak. "Hold your line and don't slip like the old wall clock your mother tuned so the house kept honest time." Friday brought an unexpected coda from an unlikely source. Charlotte Lifestyle called. On the other end I heard keyboard clacks, then an editor reading as if from a script. "The story has become too complicated for our readers." "Complicated is the word you print when you mean true," I said. "You didn't run out of pictures, you ran out of a fake ending." They danced around the advance they'd paid Madison. "Between us and Miss Richardson," the editor said. "But misrepresenting material facts would violate our contributor agreement." I thanked them for their clarity, such as it was, and hung up. Saturday morning carried a softer ring. Darren Turner phoned Mark and then texted me a one-page mock brand book for a new line he wanted to build. Family Archive. The logo draft used a scan of Grace's handwriting for the word home. Mark stared at it for a long moment, then smiled. "This work captures people," he said, "not masks." He explained Darren's offer. "Strategy and business development, what I do at the firm, but for small, real businesses. Weekends to start. People who build honest work with their own hands." "And do you care about that?" I asked. "I care about meaningful work," he said. "Darren is building something that keeps memories, not optics. I'll keep my day job for now, but I want to build something I can be proud of without pretending to be someone else." That afternoon we drove to Grace's grave. Mark hadn't visited since the funeral. He knelt, eyes wet, and set a new pair of garden gloves at the base of the stone. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm sorry I got lost for a while. I forgot what you and Dad taught me about what matters." I knelt beside him. "Your mother understands, son, and she's proud of your choice." Wind lifted the ribbon in a wreath and fluttered open the church card tucked into the flowers, stopping on a line Grace had underlined years ago. "The truth sets you free." No theatrics, just air and silence doing what only time can. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He chose to live worthy of it. By Sunday evening, October, giving way to November, the worst of the storm had moved to memory. Mark stayed to help me cook where all of this began, at the same stove where a so-called $190,000 wedding invoice first hit my counter. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think I'll find someone who loves me for who I am?" "I already know someone who does," I said. "Me, that's where every healthy relationship starts." The sauce bubbled. Mark stirred clockwise, focused. I told him to switch directions so the bottom wouldn't scorch. He grinned. "Change the direction, change the life." The kitchen did its quiet medicine spices, saying what pride won't. As we cooked and traded small stories and dumb jokes, I felt Grace's presence not as loss or ache, but as wholeness. We did raise a good man. He wandered, he returned by his own compass. That wedding that might have cost $190,000 ended up costing something far more valuable and far more affordable, the illusions that had kept Mark from being himself. Grace would have called that money well spent. The aftermath taught us both the old arithmetic. Love isn't something you buy, status isn't something you borrow, and family isn't something you upgrade. Those are not workshop lessons or seminar tips. They are things you only learn from pain, bright enough to let a little light in. Mark got free to build a life around truth, not image. I got free to be proud of the man he is becoming instead of worried about the costume he was wearing. For an ugly start, we earned about the best finish there is. 2 months after the non-wedding, we had new rituals, smaller, truer than anything we'd shared in years. Sunday dinner became sacred. Just us in the kitchen, cooking recipes Grace taught and talking about everything but what we'd lost. We tacked a cloth calendar by the fridge. Every Sunday Mark wrote one honest thing he'd learned that week. One entry read, "Silence isn't avoidance, it's refusal to perform." Mark took the ring back to the jeweler where Madison had chosen it. The manager, surprisingly kind, refunded 60% despite a no-returns policy. Mark didn't look at the velvet box. He looked at his reflection in the glass case and exhaled. "I thought returning it would make me sad," he told me later, over pot roast and mashed potatoes. All I felt was relief, like putting down something that never belonged to me. Why? That ring stood for a version of me I was trying to be successful enough, polished enough, worthy of Madison's world. Once I realized I didn't want to be that man, the ring was meaningless. Returning it returned the weight on my shoulders. The financial cleanup took longer but brought the same relief. Mark dissolved Richardson Lifestyle Enterprises, a process that required Madison's signature, and became, in his words, their last conversation. She signed the dissolution without comment, as if the LLC had only ever been a handy veil for purchases. She kept the jewelry. Of course she did. "Are you bitter about that?" Mark asked. "I was," I admitted, "for about a week. Then I realized I was angry at the deceit, not the trinkets. And the anger faded when I understood she now owns thousands of dollars of reminders. Every bracelet and necklace is a receipt made of metal proof of choices that cost her a person who loved her." Mark also restructured his debts with the help of a planner who is everything. Kyle Shaw is not a reputable advisor who helps young people unwind bad decisions with transparent terms. The new plan will take 3 years instead of Kyle's promised 6 months, but the rate is sane and the terms are clear. "It's strange, Dad," Mark said. "Paying my own debt feels better than having someone else pay it, even if it's harder." "There's a word for that," I told him. "Dignity." "Is it always this expensive?" "The good kind usually is." We rebuilt our relationship not on shared crisis but on shared work. Saturdays, Mark helps me in Grace's garden, learning the difference between annuals and perennials, and why some beds need replanting while others deepen their roots. "Mom knew what she was doing out here," he said one afternoon, setting seedlings Grace had started that last spring. "Every plant has a purpose, a season, a relationship with what's around it." "She approached people the same way," I said. "Build what outlasts the starters." "Is that why you fought so hard about Madison?" he asked. "Because you knew it wouldn't last?" "I fought because I saw what it was doing to you now. Whether it lasted didn't matter if the price was you." The community's response surprised us both. The friends who'd loved the photo ops evaporated once the champagne dried. Our neighbors, whom we barely knew, reached out with support, understanding, and invitations to smaller get-togethers where sincerity weighed more than shine. Mrs. Parker at the end of the block invited Mark to her grandson's birthday. "Why me?" Mark asked her. "Because you look like someone who would actually enjoy watching a 5-year-old blow out candles," she said. "And were you right?" I asked later. "I'd take that over any networking mixer Madison dragged me to," he said. "There's something holy about celebrations nobody feels compelled to document." He reconnected with people Madison had gently kept at arm's length, of course, Darren, but also old roommates who teach school and do social work. Lives not engineered for Instagram, but the kind that still remember your birthday and call when they're worried. Dad. I think I confused success with performance so long I forgot what accomplishment actually feels like. What does it feel like? Quieter, more private, something you carry instead of something you show. As winter took the edges off Charlotte, Mark surprised me again. He applied for a job at a non-profit that teaches financial literacy to families in hard-pressed neighborhoods. He admitted the salary would be a step down, but the meaning would be a step up. My objective statement is only 10 words, he said, handing me the draft resume. Help others avoid the mistakes that hurt me most. A pay cut for a raise in conscience, less currency, more currency that matters. Grace would be proud, I said. I hope so. I want to build something she would recognize as worthwhile. The last square clicked into place in December, when Madison sent Mark a letter handwritten on heavy stock that probably cost more than most lunches. He showed it to me, not for advice on what to say, but because transparency had become part of who he is. Dear Mark, it read, I've had time to reflect on what happened between us, and I want you to know I understand your perspective. Perhaps I lost sight of what truly matters in my desire to build something beautiful for both of us. I hope you find happiness with someone who cherishes the life you want to build. Sincerely, Madison. What do you think? Mark asked. It's a well-crafted non-apology, I said. Kind on the surface, no ownership beneath. That's what I thought. Should I respond? Do you want to? No. That tells you everything you need to know about the healing you've done. On Christmas morning we cooked breakfast at my place, while a clean flurry brushed the window screens. We'd invited Darren and his girlfriend, Mrs. Parker, and her grandson, a gathering Grace would have adored. Simple, sincere, grateful instead of grand. We set the table with Grace's everyday plates. Every chip was a story of laughter survived. Dad, Mark said, laying down forks, tell me the thing you keep learning. True love doesn't need costumes or spotlights, I said. It doesn't ask for strangers' approval or social validation. When you choose truth over applause, you choose the man your mother raised over the image someone else designed. Sometimes, the best gift you can give is the courage to disappoint people who don't deserve your performance. A father's job isn't feeding his kids' fantasies, it's modeling integrity when the lights dim and the cameras stop. I looked at my son, really looked, and saw a man Grace would recognize. Not perfect, not unscarred, but honest in a way that makes everything else possible. Mark, your mother would call that the best Christmas gift she could imagine, I said. What's that? He asked. Watching her son choose love over leverage, substance over surface, family over fashion. Fan. Guests arrived. The house filled with unperformative laughter. Mark cut the cake at Mrs. Parker's grandson's party later that week, a little crooked, and the child clapped anyway. Here, Mark said, mistakes are adorable, not judged. Where nobody took pictures, the memories somehow came out clearest. When the dishes were stacked to dry and the lights were off except the soft glow over the stove, Mark stood beside me and whispered, I choose this light. We were by any sane measure rich enough to stop performing. The education Mark just paid for is the most expensive and the most valuable he'll ever receive. The difference between what costs a lot and what doesn't cost a thing, between what impresses people and what actually matters, between love with conditions and love with commitment. A wedding that never happened taught us what no ceremony could. The best relationships are built on truth, maintained by respect, and honored by people who love you as you are, from where you come from, and for who you choose to be. As Grace would say, that's worth more than all the jewelry in Charlotte.